Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at Darkest Dungeon, the board game adaptation of the video game for 1 to 4 players. And no disclaimer for this one, I borrowed my friend's copy. I enjoyed the video game that the board game was based on fairly well, but found it pretty punishing. Does the board game have the same feel to it? Let's find out and get to the list. So first, my number 5 point is looking at navigating the dungeon, and this is a full con for me. And the positive thing, the reason it's only my number 5, is that it's pretty quick once you get used to it, but nothing about it I found very interesting. The key idea it leans into is rolling these negative black dice for each character and having like these negative effects, and then using your provisions to prevent them or suffering the negative effects. I get all that, but it kind of leans into something I'll talk about later in the review, which is like sort of like just the crushing despair of the game. But also it's just, even though it's simultaneous to roll the dice, it just takes a long time to resolve them, and it's not like very interesting choices as you're doing so. Like I wish they had just cut pretty much all of this aside and just like gotten you to the battles right away. I would have liked it a lot better. And my number 4, which is a mix, and something I just mentioned a second ago, is that, the video game and this game both lean into the idea of like the game being very tough and things being very challenging and despair-filled, which I totally respect from a thematic standpoint, but for both this and for the video game, I didn't really enjoy it very much. But I'll still say it's a mix for my taste, because kind of the resource management side of it is interesting. So you'll take a lot of damage in the game, you'll have stress building up, threatening to make you go insane and die automatically, and hey, you'll contract diseases, and you'll get these negative cards here, just all kinds of stuff building up, and especially if you get into a bad way, you'll have kind of like a death spiral of all these things. And a key aspect of the video game, but again, not really fun for me, this is on the negative side, is that when you go back to town, basically none of this stuff goes away. You can like pay to get rid of it, but if you don't have enough money to do so or enough days to do so, then you just kind of get stuck. So I did say there was a bit of a pro here. The pro thing is that it is kind of interesting to like manage this stuff and try to heal your people, and sometimes you'll just get in a good place, like with the right characters especially. There's some characters that heal life and heal stress that make things kind of simple, but then it's kind of too simple. Like I sort of think the game is more interesting when you are dealing with these effects, but it's kind of annoying to deal with them. I find it just kind of like, for my taste at least, like not really the best and most fun aspect of the game. Now, for my number 3 point, I'm kind of grouping a few things together, but basically this is like the campaign structure and the leveling up in the game. So after every dungeon, you go back to the hamlet, and this is kind of interesting. You have different events, you have a different number of days to kind of heal and level up. I like the choices here, okay? But again, this is a mix for my taste because it has some like balance issues, and people are writing about these online as well. And that applies to the character leveling up too. I like character leveling up. It feels a little anemic in this game in that when you level up, generally, you just deal more damage. Usually the effects don't change. And some of the level ups are like totally worthless. Like you get a +1 to hit with the skill and nothing else. And then the way the campaign ramps up from level 2 and then to level 3 and then Darkest Dungeon, I think that's pretty cool. And I think like the boss fights are cool, and there's variety in how the bosses affect the game. Not a ton, but a little bit. But it's also got its flaws as well, because the swinginess of the battles once you go into level 2 and level 3, because you're just adding in tougher monsters into this big deck, but you might never draw them. So you might get like a room that's all the toughest monsters and be crushed. You might get a room that's all level 1s, and like you often will because there are a lot of the deck. It's a bit of a mixed bag overall. There's a lot of things that I don't like. I feel like the development is a little bit weak in this area in general, and the balancing. But hey, finally, let's get to some pros. I have some pros. The combat is where the game shines. This is by far the best part. And for my number 2, I'm focusing on one side of it, the enemy side. And I really like these enemy activations. Like, yes, the graphic design is a little bit ugly to me, but I think the enemy variety is really nice in the ways they activate. A really cool thing is the idea of stances, and the enemies take different actions based on where they are in the stance order and have different activation orders. I think all of that is really cool, but maybe my favorite thing about the enemies, and this is just like my type of AI system, so if you don't like this as much, you might not enjoy it, is that besides the variety in their actions, the actual activation is super simple. And it just flows so smoothly, is so quick to resolve, and again, great variety in them. So yeah, I think the enemy AI and how the enemy activate, all a slam dunk for me, and the bosses are cool too. And then my number 1 is turning around to the heroes, and that's also a pro for me. I have a lot of fun with how the hero turns go. Again, you have the stances, this time affecting which abilities you can use and who gets targeting priority from enemies. I don't find this nearly as interesting as the enemy one, so I guess this is less of a pro than the enemy one. But then the actual ability use is, again, very straightforward like the enemies. Now, again, this is less of a pro because I do find even when I level up to level 4 and level 5 and have more abilities, I tend to like spam the same 2 abilities and maybe drop in a third one every once in a while. So it's not like the hero turns are super varied, but the simple choices of like how to attack the enemies and like when to push for a treasure chest or when to finish people off quickly and who to combine fire on. I think all of that is great. So yes, I have some caveats for my number 1. There are some parts of the hero turn that aren't super exciting, but definitely by far the best part of the game. Overall, I think people might enjoy Darkest Dungeon if they like interesting but quick and light tactical dungeon crawler experiences. And also if you enjoy the idea of building a team of different characters and comboing their abilities together can be pretty cool. But on the other hand, you might want to avoid this one if you like narrative in your campaign game because there's basically nothing here. Similarly, I think the ramping up, leveling, and balancing all have issues. And if you don't like randomness ruining your plans, it also might not be too fun. But if you want to see the game in action and judge for yourself, I have a full solo playthrough on the channel. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.